My son stopped calling my mother Grandma 3 weeks before the police got involved. I didn't notice it immediately. That's the part I replay sometimes. You think you'd catch something like that right away, but life gets noisy when you're barely holding it together. Bills, work, school forms, laundry that smells sour because you forgot it in the washer overnight. One night I heard him say, "Your mom," instead of Grandma while talking to me in the kitchen. Just casually. "Your mom said Tyler doesn't have to share his room anymore." I remember turning around with a plate still wet in my hand. "What?" But he had already gone back to drawing at the table. Kids do that. They drop something devastating into the middle of ordinary conversation and then move on because they don't yet understand which sentences change a room. About 4 months later, my mother sat in county family court crying into a tissue while photographs of bruises on Evan's wrists passed between attorneys. She kept shaking her head and whispering, "This isn't what happened." The problem was, by then there was video. And video doesn't care which family member usually controls the story. My name's Rachel Holloway. I was 33 when my younger sister managed to convince half my family, and honestly part of me, that my son would be safer without me around. The scary thing is, she never screamed, never threatened anyone, never even sounded particularly angry. Nicole just had a way of making concern feel contagious. She'd say things softly enough that people confused softness with truth. By the time everything finally exploded, nobody could remember exactly when the narrative started changing. Only that it had. I was the older sister, the practice run. Pregnant at 23. Married too fast. Divorced before 30. My ex-husband, Caleb, sold insurance and believed emotional difficulty could usually be solved by leaving the room long enough. By the end of the marriage, he talked to me the way exhausted people talk to customer service representatives. Polite, detached, already mentally elsewhere. After the divorce, he moved to Knoxville with a woman named Jenna who posted inspirational gym quotes online and called Evan bonus family. Nicole loved her immediately. Of course she did. Nicole loved orderly people. People who folded blankets decoratively and used phrases like mental wellness journey without irony. Meanwhile, I was always slightly behind on something. A payment, a permission slip, sleep. Not disaster-level irresponsible, just visibly struggling in a family that treated visible struggle like a character flaw. My parents lived 20 minutes away in Brentwood. Big brick house, quiet street. My mother still decorated seasonally like the neighborhood was being graded. I started leaving Evan there after school when my work schedule got worse. At first, it genuinely helped. My father would take him for burgers. My mother helped with homework. Nicole's son Tyler played video games with him downstairs. Normal family stuff. Or what looked like normal family stuff from the outside. The first strange moment happened during a Sunday cookout. Nothing dramatic. Cheap hamburgers, kids running through sprinklers. My father burning everything on the grill because he refused to admit he needed reading glasses. At some point I heard Nicole say, "Tyler gets anxious when Evan sleeps over too many nights in a row." She said it while slicing tomatoes, not even looking at me. I laughed a little because I thought she was joking. "She's 8, Nicole. I think he'll survive." 10, she corrected automatically. Then, I'm just saying routine matters for kids. Nobody responded, but my mother gave this tiny nod without realizing she did it. That's how it worked in my family. The real conversations happened underneath the spoken ones. A few weeks later, Evan started asking odd questions. Did you forget my medicine today? He wasn't on medication. Why does Aunt Nicole think I get angry so much? Or, am I stressful? Stressful? Who asks a child if they're stressful? One night I finally asked him directly whether someone had said those things around him. He shrugged without looking away from the TV. Aunt Nicole says you get overwhelmed easy. The worst part was how familiar the language sounded. Not because I believed it, because I'd heard variations of it my entire life. Rachel's emotional. Rachel takes things personally. Rachel gets overwhelmed. Families repeat identities until they harden into fact. Around that time, my hours got cut at work after a restaurant chain we supplied went under. I started driving DoorDash at night to cover rent, which meant Evan spent even more time at my parents' house. I hated it. Also needed it. Those two things can exist together longer than people admit. My mother began offering advice constantly. Maybe Evan needs more structure. You know Nicole reads parenting research constantly. Boys need consistency. Sometimes she'd send me articles at 6 in the morning about childhood emotional regulation. No message attached, just links. I stopped opening them. Then Caleb called asking if I'd consider adjusting custody logistics temporarily. That's divorced parent language for, I'd like less responsibility but don't want to sound like the bad guy. We fought for maybe 20 minutes while I sat in my car outside a Walgreens eating stale fries out of a paper bag. Afterward, I cried so hard I got a nosebleed. Not cinematic crying either, just ugly, gasping exhaustion. I didn't tell anybody about that night, especially not Nicole, because people like Nicole can smell instability the way some dogs smell storms. Things got worse slowly, which somehow made them harder to trust. Tyler stopped inviting Evan into his room. My mother started referring to visits as giving me a break. Nicole offered to help enroll Evan in behavioral support activities, whatever that meant. Every conversation felt weirdly documented, like invisible paperwork was being built around me while I was still inside the room. Then came March. I had to go to Atlanta for a mandatory restaurant suppliers conference. 2 days, 1 overnight. I almost canceled because Evan didn't want to stay over. He's been weird lately, he said quietly while I packed. Who? He shrugged. Everybody. I should have listened harder. Instead, I told him it was one night and promised we'd get pancakes Sunday morning. When I dropped him off, my mother was outside trimming dead flowers from the front porch planters. It had rained earlier. Everything smelled damp and muddy. Nicole's SUV was already in the driveway, even though she claimed she wasn't coming by until later. That sat wrong with me immediately. Not enough to turn around. Enough that I noticed. My father hugged Evan and joked about pizza night, while Nicole stood near the kitchen island scrolling her phone. At one point, she looked up and said, "Hopefully we have a calm weekend." Calm. Always that word. I left around 4:30. At 9:52 that night, while sitting through a presentation about commercial refrigeration contracts, I got a voicemail from my mother asking me to call when I had a second. No urgency in her voice. That scared me more afterward. I stepped into the hotel hallway and called back. No answer. Then Caleb called. Then my father. Then an unfamiliar number. By the time I answered the police officer, my hands were shaking hard enough I nearly dropped my phone. He asked if I was Rachel Holloway and whether Evan had asthma. I remember staring at the hotel carpet while he talked, because suddenly looking at anything farther away felt impossible. A neighbor had called after hearing banging from my parents' detached garage during the storm. Police found Evan locked inside. Not accidentally. Locked. The officer kept speaking calmly, professionally, but my brain snagged on stupid details. The ice machine humming nearby. Some guy laughing at the far end of the hallway. My own reflection in a decorative mirror looking completely normal. I drove back to Tennessee mostly in silence except for one point near Chattanooga, where I started screaming at nobody. At the hospital, Evan looked exhausted in a frighteningly adult way. My mother sat beside him crying. Nicole stood behind her, rubbing her shoulders slowly like she was preparing someone for a funeral viewing. My father wouldn't look directly at me. Nobody gave a straight answer, just fragments. He got upset. Things escalated. Tyler was frightened. Your father panicked. Finally, Evan said quietly, "Grandpa thought I was trying to hurt Tyler." I looked at Tyler. He immediately buried his face against Nicole's side. And I knew. Not the whole story. Enough. The police separated everyone eventually. A social worker asked Evan questions in another room, while officers reviewed security footage from the property cameras my father installed after a break-in scare the year before. Nicole kept insisting there had been confusion. That word made me physically angry after a while. Confusion doesn't lock a child outside during a thunderstorm. The footage was worse because it was ordinary. No screaming, no dramatic violence, just bad decisions happening calmly. Tyler and Evan arguing near the garage. Tyler leaving. My father walking outside 10 minutes later carrying Evan's backpack. He opens the side door, says something. Evan steps inside. Then my father locks it. Just like that. No hesitation, no visible panic. Like putting away tools. The most disturbing part happened later. Around 40 minutes after Evan was locked inside, Nicole walked out with her phone in her hand. She stood there beside the garage for maybe a minute, looking at the door, typing something. Then she went back inside. That image bothered me for months, not because she caused it alone, because there was still time to stop it, and she chose the easier social path instead. The investigation lasted most of the summer. CPS interviews, family court, supervised visits. My mother kept trying to pull conversations sideways into emotion instead of facts. You know your father loves him. Nicole was under stress. Families say terrible things when they're scared. Maybe. But most families don't lock children in garages because one cousin claims another looked aggressive. Tyler finally cracked during a child interview. Not dramatically. Kids usually don't confess dramatically. He admitted Evan never threatened him. They fought over a video game controller. Tyler got mad. Told adults Evan shoved him because he knew they already worried about Evan's behavior. Then he said something I still think about. My mom said people only listen when you explain things the right way. That sentence explained more about Nicole than anything else ever did. Court records eventually showed Nicole had been documenting concerns about me for nearly a year. Screenshots, school emails, notes about emotional instability, conversations with Caleb. Not because she wanted custody exactly. I think she genuinely believed she was the stable one, the responsible one, the person who understood how families should function. That's what made it dangerous. People willing to hurt you for money are simple. People willing to hurt you while feeling morally organized are harder to survive. The last hearing ended in August. My parents lost unsupervised access to Evan. Nicole and Tyler were ordered into counseling. Caleb suddenly became much more interested in appearing involved once attorneys entered the picture. Afterward, my mother waited for me outside the courthouse near the parking garage. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not weak exactly, just worn down around the edges. For a second, I thought she might finally apologize directly. Instead, she said, "I just wish you'd tried harder to keep this from becoming public." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because even then, after police reports, court hearings, photographs, interviews, she still thought exposure was the tragedy. Not what happened to Evan. Exposure.